Keith, so like, what's your like background? You have an unusual name.
Yeah, so I'm half Italian, half Japanese, if that's where you're asking where the name comes from. Background in terms of professional life. So I started out, I kind of wandered into games, not exactly straightforward. So I spent 5 years U.S. Army, including part of that in special operations and a tour in Iraq. That was a whole other life later on when we have beers. We can talk about that side. Short stint in finance, in private equity, and then found my way into games. And so been in games for about a little over 10 years now, always in free-to-play. So kicked off in gaming at a company called Area Games, where we were publishing mainly client-based MMOs from Asia. And about those of you that remember were in the industry at the time, 10, 11 years ago, free-to-play was a joke, right? At GDC, at DICE, we would kind of be in the corner like the geeky kids, like Matthias was showing on his slides, kind of being laughed at. Not the cool, rich, geeky kids, but the ones with the skateboard smoking pot. And from there, moved into kind of the first wave of Gold Rush, which was the web side of things on Facebook and on the web platforms.
So MMOs you were doing?
So this was at Kabam, and we did Kingdoms of Camelot. Nice. So kind of the early SLG games that have evolved to games like Game of War now. And was there for that transition into mobile as well. So I remember at Kabam, we launched one of the first $100 million top grossing games, Kingdoms of Camelot, on the platform, and that signaled some of that sort of takeoff, second wave Gold Rush potential in free to play, and then slowly, maybe not all the way yet, but free to play and mobile kind of started to take center stage. Since then, worked at Cybo Games. Some of you guys may have heard of them. I think I saw something online. They just posted 2.5 billion installs in Subway Surfers now. Congratulations to those guys. And then in a roundabout way, I found my way to Wargaming as well, and been here for about 2.5 years running mobile.
Cool. So let's just stick with you for a sec. So like Army, equity, free to play. Do you use any of the stuff you learned in the military in your work, or have you?
Definitely. Matthias was talking in the last little chat about culture, and I think some of that so in special operations, we did a lot of, let's call it, we're not going to that. We did some interesting stuff, and we worked a lot with different cultures, right? And so understanding where another person is coming from and being able to integrate that into your own objectives and collaboration is very important. And so some of that is used throughout those different industries. I would also say a bit of hierarchy as well. So knowing when to go into a command and control mode and when to be much more agile is something that I see still holding true to today. And probably the most, let's say, tactical piece, I'd say, is going, again, back to military. We did it in private equity and done it throughout my games career, is this idea when a company's at scale and you have multiple games in different product life cycles, you'll often have, maybe not the most ideal distribution of talent as those products move through life cycles. So calling out like one function in particular, product management, analytics, kind of that hardcore optimization, is oftentimes best used during the launch phase of a free-to-play product. And some of those guys will find themselves or make their name on a launching product, help scale it up. But then, as that product ages, if a company is not set up to extract them from that and deploy them, so to use some of those military terms, which we use still to today, then you'll struggle, right? And you'll have that inappropriate distribution of talent.
Cool. So let's move on to kind of wargaming. So what do you do there? You said you were there about 2 years. How hands-on are you? What do you do there?
Yeah, so 2.5 years.
Like beat people up.
Running mobile. No, haven't had to beat anybody up or get beat up more. I'm more of a nerd for quite a while. So mobile at Wargaming. Wargaming has been doing mobile for a number of years, even before I got there. But really with Victor and the other executives bringing me on board, we attempted to put more of a cohesive strategy together.
So like What's Wargaming's backstory?
Yeah.
You know, what's the big hit? Tell us about that. And then I think what we talked about at the mission briefing about how you were structuring mobile is really interesting. So can you talk on that?
Sure. So Wargaming has been around for about 20 years. And those of you that know the company, you probably know us through some of our flagship titles like World of Tanks or World of Warships, which are much younger than 20 years. So the company, like many companies, was born in one place in Minsk in Belarus as a small, set of entrepreneurial, really just passionate gamers. Victor Kisley, our founder and CEO, just loved playing games growing up, from board games and chess to video games, and that's all he ever wanted to do. And he brought together people that were like-minded. Like many companies, especially back then, especially located where they were, they struggled. So they were on the treadmill of, make a box product for a publisher, hope you get enough money from that deal in order to stay alive, to get the next deal, and so on and so forth. The company had a very lucky event, not associated with the business directly, where they had a technology startup that had a liquidity or an exit, and they plowed all that back into games, and that's part of the company culture of kind of risking it all and making something big. And that game started off as an MMO, which they knew they wanted to make. They were like, we want to make an MMO, we want to make free to play, we want to make something that ourselves would play. And they actually started off making a fantasy MMO, which about 8 years ago made a lot of sense. You had World of Warcraft, you had EverQuest, things like that. But they realized, actually, and this was a really key moment for the company, that they sucked at fantasy. They didn't like fantasy. And they knew they weren't going to be as good at making that as everybody else. And so they pivoted with the help of some key creative leadership who are still at the company today, that moved into what ultimately became World of Tanks. And that focus on something that the company had experience in, knew, and was personally passionate about, underlies a focus or kind of creates some of that foundational culture that still persists in the company to today. And so 8 years ago, we launched World of Tanks. Funny enough, not only, I was at Area Games at the time, and Wargaming came to us and asked us to publish World of Tanks, as they asked many other publishers. We all said no, very stupidly, and Wargaming published it themselves. And that success just took off, and particularly focused in the CIS region, but it has since become much more of a global phenomenon. And so about 5 years ago or so, after the success of World of Tanks, the company started to get into mobile. And like many big companies, had seen this sort of innovative platform as something to experiment on, something that was interesting, but didn't quite know how to approach it. And our strategy back then was one of shotgun. So just let's do a lot of stuff. Let's buy some studios, invest in things. And for that, we got World of Tanks Blitz. But we realized that we needed to bring in something much more cohesive and sort of try and fast forward to the question about how are we structured. So Wargaming Mobile, which is a sort of semi-independent, vertically integrated unit within Wargaming, is really a mix of what Wargaming has at its roots. So in terms of our franchises, culture, like where people come from, most of the employees in Wargaming Mobile are from a CIS cultural heritage. However, we've also infused that with a lot of experienced Western talent, like myself, people that have worked on large-scale mobile and free-to-play titles that have been successful outside of the CIS, and that merger is forming the studios and the products that you'll be seeing coming from us in this year and into the future.
Are you doing publishing?
Yes.
Okay.
So we also do publishing as well, and yeah, we take a very it's a benefit of being a large, private, well-funded company that we could focus and have sort of a standard model of doing things. That's just not how we are. So, we publish World of Warships Blitz, great example. Here's a game that would have made sense for us to build. It's kind of an obvious game. It is a mobile version of one of our flagship PC titles, but it's actually a published game. Because what we saw was that another team had built a game that we probably should have built, and it was great, and they needed our help and the infusion of our brand and publishing capabilities to make it great. And so we did that.
So the Warships game is basically a published title.
On mobile,
Okay,
correct.
cool.
It's a third-party published partnership. Yeah.
Was that IP put in as part of the publishing deal?
Correct.
Okay.
The IP, we do the live operations in the West. We actually have, so the development studios in China. We publish in China with another partner, NetEase. Some of you guys have probably heard of them. And then we do the publishing around the world.
So is World of Tanks Blitz the big title now?
It is the largest live mobile title we have currently. Correct.
Yeah, so I want to kind of get into the topic of cultural phenomenon, and so I guess we can use that as a starting point. So, are you planning on growing that to that kind of status, or are you thinking that there may be another game that's going to be once you kind of figure it out?
Yeah. So like what I hear within that question, like where is the cultural phenomenon on mobile within kind of the World of Tanks universe? Is it World of Tanks Blitz, the game that you see now, or is it something else? And I'd say that we approach that from the perspective of don't know, trying to be humble about it. So we do think there's a lot of growth, and we're excited by and going to try and take advantage of kind of the emergence and the explosion of shooters on mobile, which honestly, if you would have asked me personally, like 3 years ago, 5 years ago, I would have said, no way. People are not going to accept dual thumbstick.
Yes.
Like it's too clunky.
I still don't accept it.
Yeah. I definitely do. I play it all the time. I was playing it in the taxi on the way here while the guy was asking me, where are we going? One more kill. So I think there is huge opportunity in that just kind of, it started as ports, and they still very much are ports. I think most of the shooter titles we see. But much like we saw on console, I think where the refinement of controls and some unique mechanics associated with the platform will unlock more and more growth. But that for me is just the beginning, or one avenue in which cultural phenomenon around the franchise may exist, and that is there are other genres and both existing and yet to be evolved, in which the World of Tanks universe, the brand, we think it can explode. Yeah.
So when we started talking about this, I thought you guys wanted to talk about World of Tanks is a huge game, so it's a cultural phenomenon. But I think the conversation is more about you guys are using this as a tool, maybe internally. You mentioned it's kind of a quality assessment. Can this get to this stage? So maybe can you define how you think about what is cultural phenomenon in like Wargaming's mind?
Yeah. So we talk about it internally, as you said, as a bar. And there's really kind of 3 dimensions that we look at to ask ourselves, does this product or this initial idea have potential to be what we call a cultural phenomenon? One of those is scale potential. So how big, in terms of how many people could potentially or would potentially be interested in this game is first. And the nuance there is it's not just in a total absolute number. Like World of Tanks PC showed us that you can have large scale in a specific region, in other words, high penetration, and achieve that cultural phenomenon status. In other words, everybody is talking about it, everybody has heard of it. And if any of you are from any of the CIS region or spend time there, you see World of Tanks everywhere. And that's one of the ways in which that sort of scale measurement, but regionally targeted, can happen. The next is the duration of play. In other words, how long can somebody play this game for? We are, just as Wargaming, and it's just our strategy, not saying it's the only one that makes sense, but for us, we want games that people play forever, that are hobbies, that become part of their lives. And so we look at the system design, the quality of the gameplay, and ask if it meets that bar. Emotional impact.
Yes.
Yeah, so what we look for is like, is somebody throwing a phone while they're testing this game, right? That's great emotional impact. Are people staying up late while they're testing this game or playing it? Is our internal team excited? That emotional impact is that third.
What was the example you had with the coworker? Who? No, it was something about you want a game to give you the same emotion that, let's say, when your wife is talking to another man.
Yes.
That
Yes.
that
So
was
we actually do psychographic and consumer level research on genres, on why people play other games, and we try and distill it down to like this very base emotion, and and then try and bundle those up into stories. If you've ever done psychographic research, it helps to do that. And one of those is like, if you've got say a jealousy mechanic, right, or one that is meant to show envy or revenge, right, and you equate that feeling to, if you see somebody, talking to your partner, right, and that kind of emotional evocation is what we look for or measure against, right? And if we can achieve that, we feel like we're onto something.
So yeah, I mean the story that my personal story with World of Tanks is I live in Russia, so I was in a cab once, and the cab driver was telling me all about the PC game. He knew all the ammo types. He knew the size of the armor and what ammo could break that armor. And he was complaining that you guys had some mistake, but he was really passionate about it. And I'm sitting there thinking, this guy is just spending money on gold bullets. He doesn't get it. But he was, emotionally attached. Let's talk about other, let's use that formula on other things. And I think that the one we didn't mention on the call was Anthem. So I think Anthem was like, we're gonna make a huge game. It's gonna be cultural, and let's say that the game came out and was received well. What do you think about that kind of that franchise? How far away are they from?
Yeah, so I think I'm not as familiar with that title. I am almost exclusively playing mobile games these days. But what part of that definition of cultural phenomenon requires that durational sort of dimension. Requires a patience and assessment, right? I think if you look at Apex Legends or Anthem, right? These games that come out, and we all watch gaming news, and oh my God, 10 million users, 50 million users, right? But when you see that decline come rapidly thereafter, this is something that is, those games are successful, but in their own right, and for all of that, and have made money. But they are missing that kind of long-term, whether it's as a service, being able to deliver content, or just the depth and quality of the systems inside of those games to be able to meet that. They have a few of the dimensions, but they're missing some of the others. Okay. Yeah.
And then I think the other one that's interesting is Avatar as a brand, where it's like it made a lot of money. I saw it 2 times or whatever, but. What's your thought on that?
Yeah,
using the 3 pillars.
Yeah, and I remember we had spoken about this also. Yeah. Another good way to tell cultural phenomena is to look at where else is it bleeding over? Where else is this product or world or hobby bleeding over outside of where it started? Is it soap, and is it being talked about at the football games, or is it just a game? And Avatar, I think, is one of those brands that, blew up, huge, awesome entertainment product. But if we look at the attempts to bring that over into gaming and other places, have not been as successful. And so I think that whoever is there managing those franchises, I'm sure is or should be thinking about, or if those were inside of Wargaming, we would be thinking about and examining where are there holes in what we thought could be something much bigger than just a movie, or for us just a game, because oftentimes that kind of in-depth examination, that humble tearing apart will expose some of those holes, and you'll be able to figure out, hey, is this fundamentally flawed in terms of being a cultural phenomenon, or can those holes be patched or repaired?
So what's a quick example of a success in gaming that you've seen in games?
I mean, it feels like, I feel like I want to pick a harder one, but Fortnite is very obvious, and we talk about it a lot, to be one of those not only breakout successes, but has the legs of what looks like a cultural phenomenon, right? It is talked about in the schools. Like kids are talking about it in school. There are concerts happening inside of that product, right? It is expanding. It is both bringing other forms of entertainment and culture into it, as well as expanding out, right? You have, I think, on you know, U.S. talk shows. You have people doing Fortnite dances and things like that, and equating those. Those are good measures of cultural phenomenon.
Yeah, I mean, they lost the lawsuit. The dance lawsuit. I think it was lost. It was interesting.
Yeah. But it does not affect, right, their cultural phenomenon.
But it's like usually there's like, you know, lawsuits over IP, licensing stuff, and here it's over about, you know, some kind of little element.
Yeah.
So you know, we have a few minutes left, and I kind of want to talk about the future. And then I think the biggest thing is, and maybe everyone's thinking about this, is how would you measure internally, you know, how close you are?
So it's extremely hard. We use every form and method you could think of. You know, we have a UX lab in which we can actually see sweat palpitations of players and things like that. So we do all those mechanical, methodological activities, and they are important. But we also overinvest in quality. And I think that's something that sets us apart. And you spoke to it a bit when you described that taxi driver who was complaining about, you know, like we have, like what is the ROI on having a dozen of the best tank historians on staff to be able to ensure that every rivet placement is down to millimeter accuracy of tanks that never even like got manufactured? What is the ROI? I don't know. As the business guy, like I would struggle to even come up with a methodology to measure that. But what I love about Wargaming and what we do is that we don't even start to try to measure that. We say, well, of course, the bar of quality that we've set and that we want to adhere to with World of Tanks is that level. And we apply that, you know, kind of abstractly to our future products as well. So whatever, you know, those key core pillars are, that's one of the benefits of having successful product like World of Tanks is we invest heavily, overly so, into that bar of quality. And we'll do so until we are like, wow, okay, we can't put anything else into this.
Okay, in the meantime, I wanted to ask actually, so when you guys develop on mobile, do you think about that quality bar from the beginning? Or do you say, okay, this is working, let's get the rivet experts in here and all that?
Yeah, so actually more of the latter. So I would call our product strategy over time as snowball rather than waterfall, right? So if you look at what we did initially on mobile, we brought, you know, many of the very similar experiences to the mobile platform that we had done on the other platforms. We then evolved those, though, and they've become almost standalone differentiated products from where they started. The next wave of games that you will see will be a lot of us bringing the franchises that we have today into new genres where they haven't been seen before, World of Tanks, World of Warships. And then the third, in taking learnings from both of those first two waves, you'll see us striving to evolve genres on mobile. So taking emerging or, you know, maybe existing but unexploited technologies like geolocation, camera-based AR, persistent AR, things like that, and bringing them together in ways that hasn't been seen, or taking you know, like shooting as example, and devoting an extreme amount of attention and quality to the controls, which are still clunky as all hell. But we do the snowballing is one of like pulling learnings forward. It's also one of massive experimentation. I was talking to an outsource studio outside, or a representative from the studio outside, and mentioning the fact that we have many projects, tens of projects in development right now at Wargaming at various stages. And that level of experiment, he was asking, oh, is this a period of expansion? I was like, no, this is, what is it, Wednesday. That's just how we roll. So we are experimenting a lot. And so it is one of those companies, or our internal strategy is one of lots of experimenting, and then snowballing investment against things that appear to have traction, both from our own opinion internally and from the qualitative and quantitative measurements we do in the market.
Cool. All right. So if you guys want to chat with Keith, you'll be somewhere. It'll be free. You don't have to pay. But we have to set up for our next talk on here. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Keith.